Since I became wheelchair-bound due to an accident 2 years ago, the attitude of my husband and his mother had become overly harsh. "Sorry, but could you get out of this house?" one night my husband told me abruptly. For a moment I couldn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. My mom and I talked it over and decided so." "Asking me to get out means you want a divorce." "Yes, that's right. I've been thinking about that for a long time. We don't need you anymore now that you're not making money." He clenched his fist and spat out the words as if he were spitting blood. I got it. "Thank you for everything, and thank you for leaving nothing behind in the end." That's all I said, and I left my seat. They would only understand these words a bit later. My name is Emily. After graduating from college, I've been working at the current company for 10 years. "All right, I'll go home now. See you tomorrow, you guys. See you tomorrow." I closed my laptop and stood up from my desk. I looked at the clock by the window and found that I had worked 2 hours of overtime. The meeting that started in the afternoon was pushed back, and I ended up spending time preparing meeting materials and responding to emails after working hours. I left the office, took the elevator down to the ground floor, and through the glass automatic doors at the building entrance, I saw that it was already dark outside. After leaving the company's main gate, I checked the train schedule on my phone while heading to the nearest station. As I walked towards the station, I saw 2 colleagues from the same department as my husband, Bob, also heading towards the station. I wondered if Bob had already gotten home. Recently, we stopped talking about our work at home, so I don't even know if Bob's work is busy right now. To be precise, talking about work at home started to visibly sour Bob's mood, so we naturally stopped bringing it up. On the train ride home, I gazed out the window. When Bob and I were dating, we often went home together at the same time to finish work, but for the past year or 2, we have been completely apart. Suddenly, a young couple standing near the door caught my eye. I overheard them, probably college students, happily chatting about the movie they saw the other night. The happy scene overlapped with memories of the past. I managed to pass the sudden surge of emotion by closing my eyes tightly and shutting out the view. "Hi, I'm home," I called out as I opened the front door. As I took off my pumps, I noticed from the shoes lined up in the entrance that everyone else seemed to be home. In the back, the living room door opened, and the sound of flapping slippers was approaching. "Oh, hi, Emily. You were late again today, weren't you?" "Hey, Doris. Sorry for the wait. I'll have dinner ready in a moment." "Well, there's no rush. You must be tired from working late." "No, not really. I had a meeting this afternoon that got pushed back, and I'm running late, but I think I'm almost done," I cheerfully responded as I headed to the living room with my mother-in-law, Doris. After getting married, Bob and I lived together, but when Bob's father was hospitalized for a health problem, we moved into his parents' house last year and have been living together as a family of 4. "Hi, Emily, you had a hard day working late today." "Thank you." My father-in-law, who was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa, greeted me gently. He had suffered an acute subarachnoid hemorrhage last year and underwent emergency surgery. He was in a dangerous condition at one point, but after his discharge and going through rehabilitation, he is now able to live without any problems. He is of a gentle nature, and his friendly and approachable personality had made a good impression on me since the time we met. I first met him before our marriage. He worked as an accounting director until his retirement, so he is knowledgeable about financial matters. When Bob and I used to visit his home, he often gave me tips on managing household finances. After preparing dinner, we all gathered around the dining table. The other day, Alice came to visit us and we had lunch. I was surprised to see how big her daughter Rachel has grown. Oh yes, people say that children in other families seem to grow up faster, right? Alice was as beautiful as ever, and I guess having a child makes us feel more feminine as a mother. That's so nice. Alice is Doris's niece, making her Bob's cousin. Doris frequently shows her disappointment that Bob and I don't have any children. To be honest, I had a hard time with Doris because she didn't seem to be happy that I was working, even after we got married, and whenever I saw her, she would imply things like, "I want you to quit a job and let me see my grandkids as soon as possible." Since we started living together, especially on days when I come home late from work, she would bring it up for any reason. "Emily, I think you would have had the option of having a child a little earlier." "Well, I guess it can't be helped because you're busy with your work." I looked at Bob with a sideways glance as I vaguely phased through the meal, and he just silently kept eating without looking at me. Bob and I were colleagues at work, and we got married in our second year of dating. He wanted me to be a stay-at-home mom if we had kids, but we have never had kids until now, 10 years into our marriage, and we both have been working full-time since the beginning of our marriage. Bob and I had dearly wanted kids and tried everything from herbal medicine to medical examinations, but we were unable to conceive. Although I feel lonely, I have been working as hard as I can to make up for it, thinking it would be good to continue to live with just the couple. However, at some point, I started to feel an invisible barrier between Bob and me. We should have married each other willingly and walked together, trying to make each other happy, but gradually the temperature in our relationship has been different. It probably started when Bob began having troubles at work. Although Bob did not say anything to me, I had heard from a senior staff member in the same department as him that he seemed to be troubled by the fact that he was not achieving as successfully as his peers around him. Bob is calm by nature and is not a pressure taker, plus he has a habit of pushing himself too hard. Even without words, I could clearly sense his frustration and irritation. However, when I gently tried to discuss the issue with him, he stubbornly refused to share his worries, always insisting, "It's okay and don't worry about it." Since he continued to refuse to confide in me, there was nothing more I could do, and it was frustratingly helpless not being able to support him. Still, on days off, we would go on trips or relax at home together, valuing our time as a couple. When my attempts at getting pregnant were consistently unsuccessful and I was emotionally drained, he supported me without saying anything. Even though I couldn't solve Bob's current troubles, I was going to be there for him and make time for him to feel at peace. The turning point was probably when I was offered a promotion. My performance on a project was recognized, and I was promoted faster than my peers. "Isn't that great? Congratulations, Emily." He had congratulated me, but I'll never forget his expression with tears almost coming. All I could say was thank you. As my work became busier, the distance between Bob and me only grew. Eventually, the time we spent together decreased, conversations dwindled, and by the time my income surpassed his, we hardly looked each other in the eye. As I watched Bob's back as he finished his meal and left his seat without a single word of conversation, I wondered if I had been able to help him more back then by desperately trying to hang on without fear of rejection. Would we have had a different relationship than we do now? When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the stark white light of fluorescent lamps. After blinking several times, I looked around. It appears that I am lying in a hospital bed. Looking down, I saw an IV hooked up to my arm and both of my legs in multiple layers of bandages and casts. The moment I tried to move, I felt a pain like I've never felt before in my entire body. Ow! Tears blurred my vision due to the overwhelming pain. My body felt as heavy as lead, and I couldn't seem to move at all. What on earth had happened? I tried to recall the events leading up to the moment before I woke up this morning. I went to work as usual, finished a meeting and a presentation, and it had been a while since I left work on time. I left the office and was heading to the station when suddenly I remembered, during the rush hour, which was busier than usual, I heard the shrill sound of sudden braking behind me. As I turned around, an impact surged through my body. The moment I realized I had been hit by a car, a wave of fear washed over me due to the pain throughout my body. What's happening to my body now? Footsteps approached, and suddenly, The curtains around my bed were drawn open. "Oh, Emily, you're awake. Don't get up yet." A young female nurse addressed me hastily. "I know you are confused, but your doctor, Dr. Williams, will explain everything to you soon. Please rest easy." Yes, the nurse then left in a hurry. A few minutes later, Dr. Williams arrived and explained the circumstances of the accident and the details of the surgery. Apparently, a truck driver who had fallen asleep at the wheel had veered onto the sidewalk and unfortunately hit me from behind. I had been immediately rushed to this hospital after the accident and had been in surgery, which was successfully completed about half a day ago. "Well, have you contacted my family? Your husband and his parents, with whom you live, have been informed about the accident and that the surgery went well. However, they all seem to be away and cannot come right away." "I see, thank you so much." Bob was on a business trip, and his parents had been on an overseas trip since last week. From the way Dr. Williams spoke, I could somewhat imagine how they reacted when contacted. Even considering they were away, the reaction wasn't what you'd expect when being told a loved one had been in an accident. At least it was something others might hesitate to convey directly. Imagining Bob's reaction to the news of my accident, I laughed to myself. I just couldn't connect it to a picture of him being worried about me. According to Dr. Williams's further explanation, while my life is not in danger, the damage to both of my legs is particularly severe, and the prospects of walking again are slim. I listened to the explanation about my condition as if it were about someone else. It was 3 days after the accident when Bob visited me in the hospital. I was surprised to see him look terribly pained when he saw me lying on the bed with injuries all over my body. "Sorry I'm late." "Don't worry about it." "Sorry for the trouble during your trip," he said. It had been a long time since we last talked. There was an awkward atmosphere. The conversation stopped there, with both of us keeping our eyes down. Bob just left, saying he was going to talk to Dr. Williams. I couldn't say anything and just watched him go. 2.5 years have passed since the accident. I was left with disabilities from the accident on both of my legs and was forced to live in a wheelchair. Since the accident happened while I was commuting, I was able to stay with the company, but working as before became difficult, and I retired about 6 months ago. Since retiring, I've been spending time at home, but lately something has been bothering me. One thing is that Doris's attitude towards me has become noticeably harsher than before. "Emily, can I ask you something?" "Right now, sure. What is it?" "I have to go out now, so could you please fold the laundry for me? It's only folding and someone like you can do it, right, even if you can't move your legs at all." "Yes, I'll take care of it." "Good. Make sure you do it right." Since I started spending my days at home, her snide remarks have increased. She doesn't like the fact that her son's wife stays home all the time instead of working, and now every time she sees me, she comes with a set of sarcasm and a request. As I folded the laundry, I sighed. Another thing that has been bothering me is Bob's work situation. According to my former colleagues, Bob is losing his place at work, even more than before. The juniors and subordinates joining later overtook him in job performance, and people apparently felt they had to hang around him vigilantly at all times. After returning from work, he often holed up in his room, but lately he has been taking it out on me more often than ever. "Emily, I'm jealous. You don't have to worry about workplace relationships anymore, and you don't have to work to make ends meet. I heard from my mom that you've been doing nothing all day long, just lazing around. That's so nice. I wish I could live like that for once." There is no longer any trace of the gentle personality he once had left in Bob, who continues to spit sarcasm at me. In this way, I was just sad to see how Bob had changed. "Sorry, but could you get out of this house one night?" my husband told me abruptly. For a moment, I couldn't understand what he meant. "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. My mom and I talked it over and decided." I looked at Doris, who was sitting next to Bob. "Emily, since you quit your job, you've been home all the time, not paying your bills, not helping out at home, and just staying home. To be frank, it's not good for me to have you here any longer." "That's unfair, don't you think? It's presumptuous to stay in someone else's house indefinitely without contributing anything," I said. Doris continued with a triumphant look. Bob was silent without looking at me. "Bob is having a hard time at work, too. Just because you two are married doesn't mean he has an obligation to support you any further," Doris said. I asked Bob, who was looking down, "So asking me to get out means you want a divorce?" "Yes, that's right. I've been thinking about that for a long time. After all this time together, is there really nothing left of your feelings for me?" "Of course not. There is no such thing." Bob began speaking as if a dam had burst. "Do you know how miserable I felt every time I saw you? You probably think I'm a fool, don't you? You thought I was inferior to you every single day, and you felt so superior to me, right? It felt as if the threads we had spun together since the time we met were being shredded one by one. I've endured you because you are bringing money into the house, but things aren't what they used to be anymore. Now you're just a useless piece of crap with no job and no money." Bob clenched his fist and spat the words out as if spitting blood. "We don't need you any more now that you're not making money." The last thread snapped with a bump. I got it. It was the first time Bob looked at me, but there is one condition. All the arrangements and procedures for the divorce will be done through a lawyer. If you can agree to that, I'll pack my things and leave within the week. "Yes, that's fine, right, Bob?" Bob just nodded silently. "Then I guess we're done here." Bob flinched and looked at me. "Thank you for everything, and thank you for leaving nothing behind." In the end, that's all I said, and I left my seat. It's been a few days since I left the house. When I checked my phone for incoming calls, it was from Bob. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering. "Yes, Bob." "Emily, I'm sorry. Could you please come back?" "What's this all of a sudden?" "My dad told me that you had been covering our living expenses ever since you quit your job. You had been investing since you were still working, right? Now you're making enough from dividends to cover our living expenses, yes?" "Yes, that's right." "So what?" "I left the household finances to you and my dad, so I didn't know anything about it. I thought my income was used to pay for our living expenses, but it was almost all covered by your income, wasn't it?" "I really want to apologize for the terrible things I said. I'm sorry. Since we got married and started managing our finances together, I had been using my income for investments. I was originally encouraged by my father-in-law, and I have been consulting only him about financial management and investments. And what do you expect me to do by coming back?" "Well, my dad says that with my income alone, we can't possibly maintain the same lifestyle as before. And I'm not confident I can continue with my current job for much longer." "So you want me to come back just to make things easier for you guys? How dare you say something like that with such ease?" I could see Bob catch his breath over the phone. "I never said anything before because I believed that somewhere you still cared about me, even if it wasn't the same as before. But now you're not the Bob I used to love." "That's not true. I still care about you, Emily." "There's no need to say any more. After our last conversation, all my feelings for you disappeared. I'm sorry, but however you and your family end up, I really don't care anymore. Thank you for truly leaving nothing behind. No trust, no memories. Wait, Emily, please forgive me. The divorce arrangements and proceedings will be handled entirely through a lawyer. Don't contact me again." I hung up the phone after that and refused all further communication. Afterwards, the divorce proceedings moved quickly, and I completely cut off my ties with Bob. I still keep in contact only with my father-in-law. "So you haven't had any trouble with living expenses since you left Bob?" "No, not at all." "I'm glad to hear that, Emily. I'm sorry to have caused you so much trouble. When Bob and Doris told me about it later, I couldn't help but yell at them for what they had done and the way they have treated you over the years. As a family, I should never have overlooked it. I'm sorry I couldn't do anything." "Oh no, please don't worry about it. It is my apologies for the inconvenience to you as well. After I left, it seems there was constant trouble at home, even without my income." Bob and Doris continued their lavish spending and eventually took out loans against their property because they couldn't reduce their standard of living. Fed up with his wife and son, who showed no sign of changing their ways, he recently divorced as well. "This has been a good opportunity to rethink my life. From now on, I can live comfortably with what I have now, and I'm looking forward to trying new things.